Hi everyone, Magnus here, and today I'm making this video at the request of a viewer of mine who is about 2100 and was looking to try and get that final push up to the 2200 plus rating levels. So I'm going to be sharing how I was getting from like 2200s earlier and actually later in last month, and made this push all the way up to 2400 and was winning almost all of my games in the rapid pool. Okay, so first I'm going to give an example game that I think has a very good demonstration of what makes up a high level rapid game, or at least relatively high level. So I'm going to skip back to the start, and the first thing first is that you have to know your openings really well. So you have to know your openings well. And from that, I don't mean like you just have to have everything rote memorized and just have it all in your head. Of course, some memorization is useful, but at the same time, you need to be very familiar and confident with the themes and ideas within your opening. Okay. Additionally, this game shows how you need to be confident when you're able to break the rules. Now, of course, earlier on you learn all these rules in chess, like castle as soon as possible, control the center with your pawns, knights before bishops, develop towards the center, knight on the rims dim, and all of that. But as you get better and better, you need to realize when you need to break these principles and find an even better move to really put the pressure on your opponent and try and go for the win. So in this game, I go for the Sicilian defense. They go for the Alapin. I bring out my knight, attacking their pawn in the center. I move my knight to the middle. They strike. I capture this pawn here, because that was the purpose of putting my pawn on c5, was to try and control the center. I play d6, chipping away at the middle. They develop their knight. I develop my knight. And they develop the bishop, standard move, attacking my knight. I capture in the center, unleashing the queen on the defense of the knight. I still know this as theory, and I play the move knight to b5. The idea is that I'm now looking to trade queens and go for this c2 fork square. They, of course, move their queen out. Not interested in trading, they go for my f7 pawn. I play e6 here. It's not even necessary now that I know the theory anymore. I wasn't entirely sure what the theory was here, but I thought e6 was a very natural move to stop this battery with the queen and bishop that was going on the f7 pawn. Additionally, I now see that knight to a5 is a way to fork the queen and the bishop. So they play a3, attacking my knight here. And as you can see, I have this knight to a5 move, now attacking the queen and the bishop, but it's important that I see the tactics. In that my knight is defended, so when their queen is under threat, I can develop my bishop with a tempo on the queen, and the queen would be forced to move somewhere from which the knight can then strike these weak squares here. So I go for knight to a5, the bishop gives a check, bishop to d7 can still be played because their knight is under threat, cannot take my knight here. And if they just trade bishops, then their queen is still hanging, and my knight has access to these beautiful squares here. So they play queen to a4, trying to apply pressure down this diagonal. But now I have some deflection sacrifices with my knight on b4, and these are critical. Without these deflection sacrifices, the game would actually be almost worse for black. So I choose, unfortunately, the slightly worse deflection sacrifice, knight to d3. Considered a mistake, though I don't think it's that bad. The only move is king to e2, and I could see that I could take the bishop, bring their knight, and then retreat my knight. I have the bishop pair, their king's in the center, I'm castling pretty soon, and I thought I can bring my rooks to the center and get a very good game. So this is exactly what happened. I brought my knight back, and critically, all the way back here, when I played this move, knight to d3, I had to have seen that after all of these exchanges and my knight drops back to c6, that they can, firstly, they decide to develop, but I was also thinking here that you have to be aware of this move with bishop takes c6, rook takes c6, and the potential for queen to d7, pinning the rook to the queen, from which I would be able to take the queen, take the rook, and would win the game. If they didn't have this move, if I didn't have this move, queen takes d7, and were to just take here, This would simply be a draw because I have to go king e7, and if I block, I would lose my rook. And after king to e7, they could just repeat moves with me, queen to c5, queen to c6. So I had to see all of that back on knight to d3. So they develop their knight. I play a6, so I still see the idea after rook takes d6, queen to d7. As you can see, we're not in theory anymore, and you just have to be calculating. You've got to be looking at your opponents forcing moves here. You can't be in a situation where you're playing a6 and you're missing rook takes c6. You have to have a follow-up. You have to look for your opponent's most forcing moves and always have a response. So queen to d7, I end up taking. Apparently this is equal. I play bishop to e7, a small mistake because their knight can go to c4 and reclaim material. It would be a fairly equal endgame, but their king is in the center, and I honestly still like black's chances with such an active queen. But they played the mistake queen to c4. 2400s aren't perfect. We do make a lot of mistakes still. Castles, and they decide to take my pawn on a6. From here, I can bring my rooks to the center. I decide not to trade rooks because I actually think that I want to keep some material on the board given that their king is so vulnerable, and I decide not to trade rooks. I attack their queen. Apparently a small mistake, but after queen to d3 and queen to b7, hitting the rook and going after the pawn, they bring their rook back. I centralize my rook. They block, and now I just grab. You've got to notice that this rook is sufficiently defended, and after some exchanges, I can notice that I'm winning this a pawn. And another really important thing, you've got to be confident in your endgame conversions. If you are not confident that you can win this endgame with rook for knight, then you are not going to be able to push for the higher ratings. So knowing your endgames and knowing how to grind down your advantages is extremely important, okay? Knights can be tricky, but you've got to learn how to control them in a very careful way. You got to look for all the opponent knight jumps at all times. Try and control them with your pawns, control them with your king. Make sure that if there are checks to your king, that you have a way out of them. I know it's a lot of work, you got to calculate, and it's quite tiring. But as you get better, the more you train this calculation skill, the easier it's going to be for you, and the more natural it will come. They play f4, I take. They ended up blundering their f4 pawn here, making life easy for me. Simply, I play rook to g4, attacking this pawn, forcing it forward, which it does. And when I played rook g4, I also saw this move, bishop to g5, forcing off at least one of the knights, either by a skewer or by a capture. They decide to capture, they attack my rook, and I play rook to g4 here. I don't play rook to f5, even though it is still winning, because I saw that g4, I have to play rook takes f3, and of course, this is a winning king and pawn endgame. Know your king and pawn endgames, but I just didn't feel like going for this. I'm like, why not just keep the rook on, keep things simple, put my rook on the side of the board, very far away from the king, so that I can't get forked by their knight. And this nice little move, f6, restricting their knight's movement. As you can see, their knight has no forward hops. It would have to go back, and even when it goes back, it doesn't really have anywhere to go. So this move f6, nicely restricting, trading off one pawn, and I simply start to take space. I corral the knight, and this nice finishing move, pawn to e4, deflecting the king away from the knight, forcing it off, and I simply capture the knight. A couple more moves get played, force my opponent's king to the side of the board, start throwing forward Freddy, not Eddie. Eddie the e-pawn is this guy, but I start throwing forward Freddy, and my opponent simply resigns the game. Now, in terms of learning your openings, I believe that it's really useful to use Lichess. Now, what I would recommend here in Lichess is that you go to the Learn tab. Lichess is a great tool, free to use. I would go to the Study tab. You click Create a new study, Create My Study. I can show you just like this. You go to My Studies. If you want to create a new one, you can click Create New Study. And if you don't, then like this old one that I've just created, you can click on that. And as you can see, here's the master's database right here. And one other thing about openings, I'd really recommend that you try and pick up, if you're trying to push 2100, 2000 plus, looking for those higher ratings, I think that you should definitely try and pick up more than one opening with white, more than one opening with black. Try them out. Try and get some experience, because the reason is, let's say you're playing e4 all the time, you're not getting familiar with d4 positions. Maybe you should start playing knight to f3 and d4. Right? If you're always playing d4 or c4, maybe try out e4 or g3 or knight f3. Just try out different systems, try and get different endgame positions. But of course, do your research. I'd say like find a YouTube course for whatever opening you want to learn. It's all free, and then from there you can supplement with more Lichess personal analysis in the database. And I'm just going to give one quick example in E4. I know that the guy that requested this actually plays this system, but definitely for him that's watching, I would recommend trying out knight to f3 and g3 bishop g2 setups. I think that would be a really good choice for you. But in this circumstance, I'm going to be looking at bishop c4, bishop's opening. I think that this is a fantastic weapon that you all should be using at least one point in your chess journey. And let's just say, like, as you can see like all of the different time amounts that this has been played in the master's database. It's really useful here. It doesn't like confuse you with any engine analysis. It shows you the tried and tested results, because you can always play the top engine lines, right? But it's best if you try and find the ones that have high win percentages that you're going for, because that tells you that you're going to get positions that make your opponent uncomfortable. Masters are struggling in these positions, okay? So like bishop c4, bishop c5. And also importantly, you can see in the Masters database, knight to f3 is the most common move attacking this pawn, but that transposes back into another opening that we're not trying to learn. So in this circumstance, you want to try and be guiding all of your openings down into as few branches as possible. You don't want to be learning lots of branches. So for that reason, I think that knight to c3 is a great option for you if you want to try and keep it consistent with d3 and f4, which is the opening that you'll be trying to play. For example, after the common move knight to f6, you're now playing d3, and all of a sudden you've got a very standard position and you've transposed back into another line that you're studying. You want all of your lines to be able to have lots of transpositions into one another so you can get more games and more familiarity with the end games and the different middle game plans and ideas. Alternatively, another nice trap in this one is that if they copy you, there's this really cool move, queen to g4, and just showing you a quick line after queen to f6, there's knight to d5. You can sacrifice this pawn here, and then as you can see their g pawn is hanging, and let's say that they play like king to f8, boom, knight to h3, and if queen to d4, d3, c3, and bishop to e3 are already coming, and black is in seriously hot water here. So it's good to learn your lines very well, know your tricks and traps, and try and be thorough in your explorations. Don't just blindly follow the engine. Make sure to analyze first without the engine, then go back through your analysis with the engine, check where you went wrong, and potentially what mistakes you made. So that's what I would always recommend doing. If you analyze with the engine on at first, you're just going to be attracted to the top choice, and you're not going to be going through the mental process of actually trying to force yourself to find the best moves, because ultimately you're not going to have prep forever. You're not going to be able to prepare every single move that your opponent plays, so it's really important that you can try and practice those skills of finding the best move on your own, unassisted, in a comfortable environment where you're just analyzing, and you can really get that down. Finally, I'd just like to show you this other tool, Chess Tempo. I think it's a great free tool. You can pay for more. I don't really know what it does, not tried it, but they've got good puzzles. Chess.com puzzles are pretty good early on. They can get you those basic tactics and patterns all down, but eventually their puzzles seem to get quite obscure, although it's still very good stuff in terms of like if you filter your puzzles, that can be great as well. So for example, I can go to the tactics trainer here, and I can like look at all these sets. You can have difficulty settings, and there's this they've got really good filters here. So there's like fast puzzles, and if you go to the themes and motifs, you can if you look through your games, you can pick up, am I missing checkmates? All of a sudden, boom, you can go to these checkmates, pick like your main in ones, twos, and threes probably will be the most useful. If you're feeling adventurous, want to try some of the other ones, I would say made in 5+ is not really relevant most of the time. And if you want to take a look at like different tactics. There's all of these different ones here. If you notice you're missing a certain tactic a lot, I'd recommend just train it, drill it non-stop until you find that you're getting these puzzles consistently. Okay, and yeah, there's like other checkmate motifs. These are all really nice. You can learn all these different ones, smothered mates, etc. And at the same time as well, you can see the previous puzzles that you've done and where you went wrong. And I think that's really helpful. I'd recommend that you review the tactics that you have messed up in the past. And alternatively, there's the endgame training. I think this is really good too. You can click like on the train endgames. You can pick once again your sets, what type of endgame you want to try and learn. Like there's different theoretical endgames that you can try and study, rook endgames, queen endgames, all that good stuff. Load one up now, so you can see that like this is queen versus bishop. How do you win as quick as possible? So I'm thinking like maybe it's queen h2, king moves to the side, king g4, and as you can see, like you can't use arrows in this, so it's really good for trying to train your visualization and pattern recognition. For example, I think the endgames in particular are great for trying to get your conversions down. So in this one, I'm thinking, yeah, queen h2, king g4, another check, like on g3, king h5, and then probably just start moving in the king. Once the queen gets to g3, should be super easy. This king can just run all the way over here, all the way back there, and it should be an easy win. So like this, something like here, block off the king. Let's make sure that the king can't get in, and yeah. So they're trying to like build a barrier here, trying to restrict my pieces from entering. Actually, this is getting a little bit more tricky. Probably something like queen to f8 and like queen g7. Just trying to force the king away. And yeah, if they go back, then I can just play this. And now I've won the pawn. And now it's as simple as checkmate on the dark squares here. Force that king back. And yeah, so just keep checking on the dark squares. It's basically the same as a king and queen mate, only difference being that it has more of a dark squared focus. So just keep bringing your king closer. Give these checks. As you can see, their bishop is now pinned. Actually, this is a little bit more annoying than I would have thought to actually win. Let's see. Where is the win? Here, king c6. Guess queen a7 is a win. So this is actually really useful to know. I'm not actually familiar with the optimal way to try and checkmate against a bishop with a queen, which is really funny. I mean, you know, the rook versus queen is actually insanely difficult to do with the queen. Like I don't even know that I don't even know that I'd be able to do it. So that's definitely good to know. I'm gonna keep trying to restrict the king. And I'm going to like try and force the king back further. Do more cutting of the king. They're really being annoying here, blocking up their king. I'm going to try and keep pushing them back on the dark squares. Like this. Okay, they've finally been forced back to the final rank. And this should be over. They are now dead in the corner. Finally delivering the checkmate. 35 moves. Apparently 25.7 is the kind of moves that you want to be, number of moves that you want to be doing in this puzzle. So I went a little bit over. Not a huge deal, but definitely would be an interesting one for me to check out if I want to try and learn the most accurate way to deliver this checkmate, so that you're not left fumbling around in a conversion in an actual game where you might be quite low on time because it's the end game. So If you guys did find this useful in your push for the higher ratings, and even if you're low rated, this is still going to be a lot of useful stuff here in terms of trying to craft your own opening repertoire. Although, once again, if you're newer, you might want to stick to some more mainstream stuff, just like YouTube content, trying to learn openings directly from that, not straying too far. But at the same time, doing your own research is always great. And what also, like, if you're newer, maybe don't be trying to break the rules as much. The rules, you got to learn the rules, and then you can start to knock down a couple of them, know when you need to keep the rules in place. So once again, if you guys did enjoy this video and find it helpful, please do consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!